G'day, my name's Desi Cochrane. Have I got a story for you? I've been at the mercy of the Australian federal government and state government for the last 20 years. The Federal Attorney General at the time was Philip Ruddock, and our Prime Minister was John Howard. He allowed a federal magistrate to make an order without jurisdiction, and after she made that order, 5 months later, he allowed the Federal Court of Australia to become the mother's solicitor, put in a warrant to seize my family home, which was nothing to do with the mother at all. It was purchased through a fatal accident a car accident that I was in, and I was residing in with another dependent child, my other son Jake, at the time. I have numerously taken it back to court to have it acknowledged that it's void ab initio. The order should have never existed, and been denied justice time and time again. I was also surrounded by police, Victorian police, and jailed for being in my own home. I was locked out of my own home. They changed all of my locks. The Australian government solicitors registered the order here in Victoria and transferred my property out of my name and put it into a clerk's name. And they wrote on the application, acting as a sheriff. That was in 2005. In 2006, I took it to the child support agency that I got jurisdiction, and they accepted an application for an assessment, which was for $14.42 due to my financial income, being that I was in receipt of a disability pension, being the victim of a fatal car accident that I was in, travelling up to see me kids. I suffer from PTSD, which is very hard for me to get all this out. I've brought it to the attention of all the ministers in the country for numerous years, and they've all said that the Federal Attorney General has portfolio responsibility for what's occurred. The legislation that protects me and all Australians is one that states Section 66E of the Family Law Act 1975, which clearly states a court must not at any time make, revive or vary an order for child maintenance if an assessment could be made. And as I said, one was made by the Child Support Agency based on the information in the court documents. The federal magistrate who made this order without jurisdiction is now a former federal magistrate. Her name is Jenny Rimmer. She happens to be a personal friend of the family, of the mother, who obtained this judgment, this order against me. She was aware that I'd been in a fatal accident, and that I was in receipt of a disability pension, and that I also had another dependent child that I care for. The criteria for fitting for an application to be an assessment to be done by the Child Support Agency, deeming it for void ab initio, has a few different criteria. The first one, which has been ignored by all of the government, is that you're eligible for child maintenance from the time you apply. The legislation was drafted on the 1st of October 1989. The order was made on the 14th of August 2001, and you're eligible from the time you apply for child maintenance, yet the order, 11 years after the court's lost jurisdiction, was still made, retrospectively. There's other criteria that also makes you eligible for a child support assessment, and that is if you have a brother or sister. They have a brother or sister that's born after the commencing date being the 1st of October 1989, which again, my son Jake was born on the 20th of February 2001, which Magistrate Rimmer was aware of. And the mother had another child, so my first children had another brother that was born in 1996. I have recently taken it to my State Attorney General again, Jacqueline Symes, and I've been ignored. Nobody has got back to me at all. I have received on the 2nd of June this year, 2022, confirmation that they did an assessment, and under Section 152 of their Assessment Act, a court order ceases to have effect from the time an assessment is done by the Child Support Agency. I've been to the Supreme Court after seeking advice from solicitors time and time again, who have all told me that 100% this is void ab initio for reasons that are ultra vires, beyond their powers and jurisdiction to make. And they've said that any clerk in the land can acknowledge it, any judicial officer can acknowledge what's that this is void and deem it, give me a declaration that it's void ab initio, but nobody has. It's been given to Jacqueline Symes, as I said earlier, and I don't even get a response. I've given, in the 2nd of June this year, I've given our State Attorney General's Department the letter from the 2nd of June this year, acknowledging that under Section 152 the order should have ceased to have effect, yet they haven't responded. Nobody's got back to me. I rang them yesterday. Yesterday I was told, because it's been also reported to IBAC Victoria, the anti-corruption squad, that it's pending an investigation and they won't be able to comment or say anything until that investigation's been completed. Sadly enough, a week ago I received a phone call from Erwin, my case manager from IBAC, who tried to brush me off and tell me that he believes it's a federal matter and not a state matter. I corrected him because he's got all of the relevant documents which will be submitted in this video. And then he retracted, saying that it was a federal matter, and said he would apologise for the delay and he was going to look into it again and then get back to me within 2 to 4 weeks. I'm in the process now of lodging an application into the High Court of Australia in Canberra to hold the federal and state attorney generals to account for not upholding the legislation which protects all Australians. It's their sworn oath and duty to do. When our federal attorney generals aren't upholding the legislation and the law, there's no law. When they're allowing judges to do whatever they like in the courts, well, you've got no rights. When they're stripping you of everything you own, fraudulently, you've got nothing. When they're denying you any representation or advocates, where are you to turn? I'm asking, please, there'd have to be some people out there that have got enough integrity and go in them to hold our peoples in power in our judicial offices to account for what's occurred. Because if it's happened to me, I can only assume how many more people it's happened to. The amount of suicides, ruined lives that have occurred because of similar things that have happened to me. These are my human rights, my constitutional rights and my legal rights that have all been violated. On the documents you'll see that we put up with this post, you'll see that it was the Federal Court of Australia that issued that warrant and was the solicitors for the mother 5 months after this order was made. Then it was the Australian government solicitors that were defending the nominated clerk of the courts, acting as sheriff, that they transferred my property into his name. Then I received letters saying from the Supreme Court and the Australian government solicitors saying that he is the person I owe money to, the person who's got my property and had my property in his name for 2.5 years. And he's the first respondent. The Australian government solicitors are defending him, not as a sheriff, just as Stephen Agnew, the person who now owns my home, my family home, that me and my family should be residing in. I ask, please, if there's any people out there that have got any legal solicitors, barristers, anyone who can assist me in this process to hold these people to account. This can't go on. Our country's a lot better than this. It's out of control. So yeah, I'm asking, please, can somebody help? I really believe I'm going to need as many shares as I can get, so that they can't just keep bubble wrapping me and just ignoring me. Because if they're ignoring me and doing this to me, what are they doing on bigger levels? This has to stop. It's treason for our Federal Attorney General not to uphold the legislation, and one that's written as plainly as it is, and yet they made one. And the assessment was done, and it should have ceased to have effect, but the Australian government solicitors still went on and enforced it further. I haven't received 1 cent from my property. I had a Mitchell Shire councillor, a local government fellow representing me by the Mitchell Shire Council here in in Broadford and Wandong. And he ended up doing a deal with the Australian government solicitors and running off with the rest of the property. It was transferred into his name, and I haven't received 1 cent. So the local government supported the state government that were assisting and allowed the federal government to register it. And everybody says there's nothing to see here, it's a federal matter. And the Federal Attorney General's Department says they cannot get involved because of the separations of powers. Courts must remain free and independent from the executive arm of government, is what I have in writing from numerous Attorney Generals over the years. Yet I've got all the documents that show that they are involved. They are the ones that took it upon themselves outside of their jurisdiction to represent the mother and to register it here down here in Victoria, and to negotiate how it was all going to be distributed and pass it on to the Mitchell Shire Councillor. This has to stop. It's been confirmed in writing on the 2nd of June this year by Services Australia, who had to get advice from the Australian government solicitors what they would put in the confirmation that an assessment was done. But they did at the very least put in there that Section 152 of the Child Support Assessment Act clearly states if an order's been made without jurisdiction and the assessment is done, the court order ceases to have effect. So it's all null and void. Yet nobody has stepped up and addressed this travesty that they've all been involved with. It's fraud, deception, false imprisonment. They jailed me for being in my own home, not to court, straight from my home, straight to jail. They couldn't even process me while I was in prison. There's no crime. When sentence management came around to work out whether it was a maximum crime or what prison I should go to, there was no crime. So I had to just remain there in the assessment prison for the duration of the time. The governor of the prison said that I shouldn't be there, but unfortunately I couldn't. Nobody would help me. Legal aid wouldn't help me to get out, nobody. I'm pleading, please Australia, there's people out there that know exactly what they've been doing. I've got all the evidence to prove it. I need some assistance. Please share this and get this out to everybody. They've destroyed a family, and it's all black and white. It's not a complicated or complex matter. It never should have occurred. I'm Desi Cochrane, and that's my story.